Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Urban Book Circle show. I'm George Wojcic, and my guest today is John Molinaro, a well-known name in the world of Canadian sports journalism with over 2 decades of experience. He's joining me today to talk about his new website called TFC Republic, and he'll be joining me soon. Hi, Mr. Molinaro, welcome.
Hey, George, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Good.
Thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate your time.
No problem.
So about over a month ago, you started a new website called TFC Republic, and I was very intrigued by this, and I wanted to ask a lot about your new project and how it's going so far.
So far, it's going really well. It's about just short of 2 months in, and I've been, pleasantly surprised by the response. Going into it, I wasn't sure how people would feel about another sort of paywall website because there's just so much content out there and so much choice that I wasn't quite sure how people would feel about having to pony up money for another one. But I've been humbled by the response. It's been really heartwarming, and it's sort of exceeded my expectations so far. So on that score, it's been really it's been surprising, but in a positive way.
People seem to be really receptive to it, and it seems like there's still a sort of thirst for this. I want to call it proper journalism, like not just long form journalism, but short form as well. Do you find that people are receptive to this as well?
I think so. I mean, I think they're probably more interested and more interested and receptive of the long form stuff. I mean, the short form stuff, I think there's just so many sort of already outlets where people can get that. But if you can sort of offer something different that isn't easily accessible in other parts of the media, then it seems like they're willing to pay for that, and that's what they respond most to. And I think that's kind of what I built TFC Republic around, is trying to do more long form stuff as opposed to the day-to-day beat reporting where people can find in other places. And I mean, as I said, so far the response has been pretty positive, whether it's, I sat down with Tim Bezbachenko last week and talked to him about his time in charge of TFC and about, the controversy over the Columbus Crew rebrand, or if it's, my take on, the CPL and what's going on there, and them trying to launch, a new second season under a bubble, or if it's, a story like Atiba Hutchinson, who at 38 is still sort of going strong for Besiktas in Turkey and for the Canadian national team. I think these are sort of different stories that you won't necessarily find every day in the major media outlets, and that's kind of sort of the gap in the coverage that I'm trying to provide.
How fulfilling has it been for you so far? Because you did leave your job with the Canadian Premier League, which was, I would say, a bold move. And so far, I mean, I noticed there's a small subscription fee, but it's not anything substantial. And I found that people are actually willing to pay the subscription fee for the proper news. Would you say it's too early to tell, or has it been have you made the good move?
Oh, I feel very good about the move. I mean, I don't feel bad about my time at the CPL, but I think it was just time to move on. I got the most out of the experience, and I'm loving being my own boss and having to do whatever I want to do and work on my time schedule, and don't have to answer to anybody, and write the stories and sort of pursue the stories that I want without having to get approval or anything like that. So for me, it's been it's been very enjoyable. I've really enjoyed the experience, and as I said, the response from people who have ponied up the subscription for it has really blown me away. So overall, it's been a very positive experience.
Is it a passion project? Because I find out of all your writing, Toronto FC it seems what you're most passionate about. I don't know if you would agree.
I think so. I mean, I think it's a passion project. I mean, before I went to the CPL in 2019, I was a Toronto FC beat reporter since day one. So it was really a big part of my life, and I really enjoyed it. And you know, all those years, did you have asked me, if I would rather write about the Leafs or the Raptors or the Blue Jays? There's no way I would have made that trade. I'm not a TFC fan, but I am a fan of covering the team. It's been such a great, enjoyable experience. And when I was at the CPL, obviously I didn't have the chance to do that because my attention was focused elsewhere, and so I really missed it. And I think that was one of the big reasons why I left the CPL too, is because I wanted to get back to what I was really passionate about and what I really enjoyed doing. That's covering TFC in a multitude of ways. So, this project TFC Republic.ca is very much a passion project.
When when did this passion first arise? When did you start writing, and was it always about soccer?
No, it wasn't always about soccer. I mean, it was probably in I would say, in grade school and then into high school when I really got into writing. I guess because my aunt was an investigative journalist with the Hamilton Spectator newspaper, and that sort of really, she was someone who I always had great admiration for, and so that sort of really piqued my interest. And then through grade school and high school, I just was always kind of writing, and it was always on. It was nothing for anything official. It was always just on my own sort of newsletters or publications that I always sort of did on my own. And that just sort of grew through, university and then into journalism school after that. And then been writing pretty much about soccer for, over 20 years. And it's just, something that's been a major part of my life. And, I really enjoy it, obviously.
I also have a bit of a journalistic background myself. I love writing. And would you say that journalism is still alive and well? I know I've talked to many people about this. Some people will say it is, and some people say, technology is where it's at. What is your opinion on this matter? Is there always a space open for good journalism?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think there always will be. I mean, I don't think there's any question that the industry has taken a bit of a battering the last couple of years because we're now living in this era of 280 characters on Twitter and Instagram posts and the instantaneousness of news transmission. So, but I do think that journalism, especially quality journalism, long form journalism, will never go out of style. It'll always be valued. It'll always be at a premium.
Um, what I was going to ask maybe a personal question. What's your favorite team? You said I noticed earlier in the conversation you said you're not a TFC supporter necessarily. Do you have a favorite team that you support?
Juventus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
awesome,
I've been
awesome.
a Juventus fan since I was a young boy. So it's everyone in my family is Juventus fans, even though my family is from southern Italy, and obviously Juventus plays in Turin, which is in the north of the country. It's just always been the club I supported, and there was never any sort of choice as to who I was going to support because my dad is a diehard Juventus fan as well.
Oh, that's cool. Did you watch yesterday's Champions League final?
I didn't because TFC was playing at the same time, so I was sort of watching and writing about that game. So it was probably like the first Champions League final I hadn't watched live in a long time. I've got a PVR, so I'm finally going to get to it tonight. But yeah, it was kind of weird missing that one.
How do you feel about the World Cup coming to Canada?
Very excited. I mean, it's the greatest show in the world coming to Canada, even if it's only for whatever it is, 8 or 10 games. The fact that Canada is holding the largest and most popular sporting spectacle on the planet, is a pretty big deal. And my hope is that it'll be a real boon for the game in this country. I think back to the 1994 World Cup in the United States and how American soccer just really exploded after that. It really sort of blossomed with the launch of Major League Soccer, and now it's like a big deal in the States. I'm hoping that the 2026 World Cup in Canada will have a similar effect here on Canadian soil.
Your website, TFC Republic, it doesn't cover only Toronto FC. It covers basically all things Canadian national team, all levels. I was going to ask, how important is it for us to have a strong Canadian national team that we can cheer for one day at the World Cup. I mean, everyone loves cheering for their countries that they descend from, but at the same time, we would love to have Canada there and to cheer for Canada. How important is that?
Well, I think it's quite important. I mean, I think the hope is that Canada shows up at the 26th World Cup and is competitive, not just as spectators who go home after 3 games. I mean, that they can actually do well in the group stage and advance out of the group. That's why I think the 2022 World Cup in Qatar is so important. If Canada can qualify for that and really sort of build on the momentum and really, get the most out of what I would say is probably the most talented core of Canadian players in a long time. When you think about, guys the caliber of Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David and Kyle Larin and Atiba Hutchison, guys who are playing at, top level and European club level. These are really unprecedented times for Canadian soccer in that regard. So it'll be interesting to see whether John Herdman can sort of put all these Canadian talents together and sort of have them gel into one cohesive unit and qualify for the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, because I think that would really be a really boon for the national team program.
Do you think he'll be able to?
It's a good question. I mean, I honestly, I don't know. I think, again, he certainly has, the talent there. Maybe not so much at the back, which I think defensively, especially in the center of defense, is a bit of an issue. But when you look at players the caliber of Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David, they're playing at top European clubs, and they're major contributors for their side. And so you combine that with all the MLS talent, guys like Mark Anthony Kaye and Samuel Piette and Jonathan Osorio. It's a talented and a deep squad, but the team it certainly has shown sort of moments under John Herdman, but other than the 2-0 win against the United States in the Nations League in 2019, it hasn't beaten what I would consider a top sort of heavyweight in CONCACAF. All of its wins are against lower rated teams, against minnows. Teams like the Cayman Islands and Cuba and Dominica. It has to really sort of beat the top sort of sides in CONCACAF, and on a regular basis. Teams like Mexico, the United States, Honduras, Costa Rica. To say nothing of the fact that they haven't shown that they can go down to Central America and Mexico and very difficult places to get results in World Cup qualifying matches, and compete at a consistent level. That for me is going to be the test. I mean, if they can get to this final round of CONCACAF qualifying, and go down where it's going to have to play, teams the caliber of Mexico and Honduras and Costa Rica, and go to those countries and get results, then I think there's a chance that they can qualify for 2022. But we haven't seen that thus far. They haven't really sort of played many of the top teams in the region. So for me, that's going to be the litmus test. And the result so far has been positive under John Herdman, but again, they've been under lesser ranked teams and not what I would consider a top tier side. So I think the jury is still out on the team.
When it comes to Canadian soccer coverage, do you think that websites and media institutions such as TSN and Sportsnet, their coverage is reducing, and it's not like as frequent as it used to be? Where it's becoming like Canadian soccer is becoming almost like a niche thing?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think they're becoming more focused on sort of the broadcast properties that they have. So that's why you see TSN go, crazy with their coverage of the CFL, and Sportsnet go crazy with their coverage of the Blue Jays. And if it's not their property, then they're definitely less interested in that. And I think there was a time when both networks carried Canadian soccer games, and now that's not the case, and you've seen their coverage lessen. I think it'll pick up again, closer to 2026 in the World Cup, because it's just the World Cup and it's the biggest sporting event on the planet, and they'd be foolish not to sort of increase their coverage. But I think it's a sad comment that that's what it takes for them to regularly cover Canadian soccer. In the meantime, I suspect that their coverage of the men's and women's teams is going to be very hit and miss.
Is it because of streaming sites and new companies that are coming out, like the Zone and One Soccer, that's kind of eating into their viewership? Do you think so?
Well, maybe, but I mean, if Sportsnet and TSN really wanted those properties, they could have went after them. They could have, outbidded DAZN and One Soccer, and they didn't. I mean, again, the issue is that there's a fundamental sort of problem, as I see it, with TSN and Sportsnet, in that they mainly focus on properties that they have. Again, if it's not something that they show on their airwaves, they're not particular. They don't go out of their way to sort of give that sort of property coverage, and that's why you see that they won't really sort of give a lot of love to the Canadian men's and women's team because they're not airing those games. If they were, then I think you'd see a lot more coverage. So it's a fundamental problem that I see within the Canadian broadcast landscape.
When it comes to writing, what would you tell an up-and-coming writer who's considering entering the business in today's day and age?
That it's a hard slog, that it's a lot of hard work, and that as glamorous as it might seem, there's a lot of, as I said, hard work and sacrifices behind the scenes that you have to make. So, I'm not discouraging anyone from getting into the business. It's a great business, and it's been very, good to me over the last, whatever it is, 22 years. But go into it with eyes wide open. Don't think that it's, just all glory and, talking to athletes and going to games and isn't all this great. There's a lot of hard work involved in it. So, unless you're prepared to sort of roll up your sleeves and really put your nose to the grindstone and do the work, then, I would suggest that this business isn't for you.
What was it like when you first entered the business? Could you say, like, to your editor or editor-in-chief, like, look, I want to do sports? Or did you really have to do anything they tell you to do when you were brand new?
No, I pretty much had to do whatever I was told to do. I mean, I think, I was given an opportunity to do some sports early on because I knew that's where my interest was. But, as someone who was just starting out, I just had to sort of, take whatever they threw at me. And that's I think, just the way it is with most people starting out in the business. But if you can sort of work your way through that and then get through it and just show them that you can do things and that they can trust you, then, other assignments will come and they'll start letting you do more and more of what you really like to do. And that's kind of how it happened with me.
You mentioned Twitter earlier. Has something like Twitter, I believe you have over 12,000 followers there, has something like Twitter made your job easier or not so much when it comes to reporting?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question. I don't know. I mean, I suppose in some sense it's made it easier in that I like the intimacy of it and the connection. I mean, it makes sort of readers and people more accessible to reporters, because I think there was always that sort of distance between, a journalist and his readers, and there was a great sense of detachment, which I never cared for. I think that gap is now closed with Twitter and other social media accounts. At the same time, it allows anyone, to post anything they want, and they're not always so sort of thorough or scrupulous in posting news, and they can sort of post any sort of rumor that they want. And it has, if it, pertaining to Canadian soccer, it has an effect on me, because then I have to sort of, if I see something on Twitter and it's becoming a hot rumor and everyone's talking about it, then I have to, chase it down and find if there's any validity to it. And oftentimes there's not. So, I mean, I guess it adversely affects me that way.
You've been with Toronto FC since day one, really. How important is it for? I was going to say back when Toronto FC first started, back in like the Danny Dichio days. How important is it for fans to remain connected to the team? Because over the years, the supporters have been there, but the coverage not so much. Do you think that your website will help with this? You mentioned that feeling of intimacy with the club.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I hope people will feel connected to the team. I think it's getting harder and harder to make those connections, just in the world that we live in at the moment with COVID, and the team is down in Florida and that they haven't played a home game since since last March, and they're not based in Toronto. So I think that's sort of made it difficult to connections. And as we sort of talked about before, there's less and less coverage of TFC just in the mainstream media, which is a shame. But that's another reason why it's making it less and less easier for readers and fans to connect with the team. So hopefully TFC Republic will fill that gap in a sense.
So far, I believe you're the only writer for the website. Will you be accepting contributors in the future?
It's something I've kind of thought about. Maybe we're only like about a little less than 2 months into the project, so maybe after a year, maybe. But right now, I'm just kind of focused on sort of maintaining the site and doing my own thing and trying to create as much quality content as I can.
Does the website get media accreditations for games, Toronto FC matches?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously I'm not in Orlando, I'm in Toronto, but yeah, I mean, I've always had a good relationship with Toronto FC, and they've, I'm still on all the conference calls with the coach and the players, and the same thing with Canada Soccer with regards to the national teams, both the men and women. They're still accrediting me and everything, so those relationships hasn't changed one bit.
Okay, well, to cap off, I guess I'll ask, where do you see TFC Republic, and I guess I can say TFC and Canadian soccer in general, in 5 years from now?
Well, with TFC Republic, I mean, I honestly don't know. I mean, it's cliche to say, but I just take it one day at a time. And if I can keep doing this, if it's feasible and can still do this in a year's time, then I'll be happy. So 5 years, I can't even think about it. Where will the Canadian game be in 5 years, and where will TFC be? I mean, hopefully. Hopefully they'll sort of hold down prominent places in the Canadian sporting landscape. I think with the World Cup coming to this country, I think these are exciting times for the men's national team. I'm really excited to see what the women do this summer in Tokyo, and post tournament how Bev Priestman will lead the team and what the future holds for that side. And I think TFC, if they've shown anything in the last couple of years, it's that they want to remain relevant, and they're not afraid to spend money and use their vast resources to make it a competitive team. And I think that's I see no reason why that they're going to let up on that. I think they'll continue to be among the top spenders in the league, and they'll continue to be a major force in Major League Soccer.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Molinaro, for taking the time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, George. Anytime.
And let's hope that one day we can cheer for Canada at not only World Cup 2026, hopefully, but may it become a frequent thing and not just a one-off.
I hope so. That'd be nice.
Thank you so much. And also, may your website reach as many viewers as it can.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Thanks. Have a good day.
You too.